Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Good afternoon, Rush Nation. We are back. We are back with another waiver wire, trying to help you get those key players that are going to help you get over the line in week 13 and get you into those elusive fantasy football playoffs. They are all kicking off in just 2 weeks' time. This season has absolutely flown by. It seems like yesterday we were drafting, and today seems like we're at the beginning of the end. And I guess it is. Every week is a must-win week now, unless you're already in your playoffs. And if you are, congratulations. No easy feat to accomplish getting that done this early in the regular season. So you've got the next 2 weeks to plan. And some of these waiver wire picks could really help you get over the line there as well. I'm going to start, as always, with the running backs and some key targets for you to consider as we go through. And this waiver wire is getting very thin at the running back position, but there is a difference maker who has come on board this week, and that is Devin Neal. Devin Neal will be probably the number one ad this week in fantasy football. He became sort of the number two when Kendra Miller tore his ACL, and now that Kamara has an MCL sprain, we could see Kamara out a few weeks. There isn't going to be anyone behind Devin Neal. Devin Neal is going to get a significant workload. Now, I'm going to kind of preface this and say that I don't think he is a league winner. I don't think he is someone who's going to absolutely blow out. He's going to absolutely blow out a load of points here. He does have a pretty decent schedule coming up the next few weeks. Miami, and then he's got Tampa, which is a difficult game. And then he's got Carolina and the Jets, and then Tennessee, which is a pretty decent fantasy playoff schedule. I don't think he's probably going to be the difference maker in the last couple of those games if Kamara recovers and he's fine. But we're not going to see significant rushing, huge upside here. This is a team that is bad. They lose a lot. They're not going to be in that positive game script all that often. So it's what he does out of the receiving game, and last week was encouraging, 5 for 43 off 7 targets. So again, we've got this sort of back who is a 3-down back. He will be on the field a lot. He'll probably play 80% or more of snaps. The worry I'm going to have here is I don't think he's going to run in a lot of the goal line pieces. I think that's going to go to Taysom Hill. So I think what we're going to do is see him in the passing game. In the PPR league, he holds a bit more volume as a result of that. He's probably going to be a low to mid RB2 in a PPR league. In a standard league, he's going to be right at the bottom of that RB2. So sort of a do you start him every week? But you've kind of got to consider this in two ways. If you're desperate, you need to go in and get him. If you need a starter to get you through the next couple of weeks, especially with buys, then you're going to have to consider that. Inversely, if you can try and block, if you're in the playoffs, you might think actually there's a team that might be getting near to contention. They might be pushing you for the seed, and they're in need of depth. You might need to bring in Neal as a blocker, not for necessarily for someone you're going to strengthen you, but they're going to hurt your opponents getting a bit stronger. So have a look at your league and have a think about that. It's going to be a good one to look at. Other running back option really is Chris Rodriguez. And again, we're looking at him thinking he is getting a little bit more work. He got the majority of the carries. He got 15 carries for 79 yards on Sunday. And 45% snap share is not particularly great. And I think where we're looking at him, we're thinking once the buys happened, and sorry, they were on buy. I'm talking about week 11. They're on buy this week. So, nothing last week, but we saw in week 11, that 15 for 79. When we're looking at week 13 onwards, we can see what they've got. Decent schedules in week 15 and 17 with the Giants and Dallas. So if we've got a healthy Washington and they can maybe compete for that low-end wild card, probably doesn't look likely, but if they've got something to play for, that could be an opportunity for Rodriguez to get involved. So he remains an ad option here, and probably one forgotten because he didn't put up any points last week. So you could probably get him quite cheap. I feel Neal is going to be expensive. He's going to cost a lot of fab to get over the line. Make sure people pay that fab as well. Put in a good honest bid, and make people pay for that fab. That's going to be really important, because I see sort of Neal as someone that could go for like $15 to $20. So put in a bid of 10, make people pay the value on him. Don't let him go cheap. Rodriguez, much lower value, probably someone that you could, I would say probably $4 or $5 max, I think is about where I'd spend on him. The other thing to do is to start looking in your players that are well over 50% owned. So there's going to be players like Sean Tucker, like Bill Krosky-Merritt. Neal is, I think, like 2% owned, and Rodriguez is like 15% owned. But the Gainwells, the Trey Benson was on a lot of waiver wires last week. He's 64% owned, but he might be out there in your league. Bishal Tootin might be available in your league. He might be dropped. Owners might have got fed up with him. Kyle Manungai, these are the sorts of names you need to just keep an eye on and just see if they've been dropped in your leagues. Highly unlikely, but you just might want to check that out. Last sort of deep stash you kind of want to look at is Jaleel McLaughlin. With no J.K. Dobbins, they're going to want someone to run out there with R.J. Harvey, and Jaleel McLaughlin will get some work. Probably coming off a bye, you can probably pick him up for nothing. So just have him as a low-end stash at the end. I like to do sort of these sort of handcuffs, best handcuffs that we've got in across the season now, as we sort of know where backfields are and what teams are doing. And so have a look for these handcuffs in your waiver wire. Brian Robinson Jr. is the number one handcuff. He is the one that you want, followed by Blake Corum, followed by Tyler Algier, followed by Tanks Bigsby. And then you probably want to be looking at like the Devin Neals, the Keaton Mitchells, Ray Davises, Isaiah Davises, Ollie Gordons. They're the kind of players you want to keep on. Even Shamaji Perine, especially with Taj Brooks out. Those are the kind of players you want to keep an eye on. And then Sean Tucker, it easily goes in there as well. So there's some good players to have a look at, and keep those. Other deep lining players that you can keep an eye on that might be worth having a look. Damian Pierce is now a Chief, so that could be a really interesting one if they get some injuries. He is on their practice squad, so it's we're talking about a dart throw, like the dartiest of dart throws, but just have a star and an asterisk next to him, because if there's some movement with Pacheco, he goes on IR, and then it looks like he's more likely to come back than go on IR, or if something happens with Hunt, then Pierce could all of a sudden become fantasy relevant. So just keep a little eye on that one. Raheem Mostert is probably the other sort of dart throw. I just think if you've got Ashton GT, there is a chance that they could sort of put him on the shelf at some point and think about next season. And if that happens, Mostert is the guy I think they will utilize. They've paid him a significant amount of money. I can see him getting utilized a little bit more as a result of that. Let's talk about wide receivers. And definitely in Green Bay, we're starting to see things kind of take shape now. There's been some injuries. Tucker Kraft obviously got injured. Matthew Golden's been injured. Romeo Dobbs missed some time. Jaden Reed is out there in the majority of leagues because he went on IR. He is looking more and more likely to come back very, very quickly. He's been designated to return from injury reserve, so we could see him in action this week. He is a player that I would be looking at trying to add in leagues. And again, because he's got no production, he's not going to be in your sleeper like being picked up everywhere, because there isn't that sort of hotness around him. So he's a player that you're going to have to go and search for, but make sure you go and do that. He is, for me, still the number one target in this offense, but we have seen Christian Watson growing more and more every single week. And for me, Christian Watson is still someone that I would be looking at more and more, especially as the Packers now with no Kraft, they're not sort of using this 12 personnel they're using more of these 3 wide receiver sets. So as a result of that, you're going to see Christian Watson out there more, and Jaden Reed potentially as well. So they are players that you want to have a look at and adding for sure this week. definitely players that I would be looking at, especially Christian Watson. Christian Watson's putting up some amazing performances, and as I sort of said last week, he is a player that he never sort of stays healthy for long. But when he is there, when he is healthy, he does put up significant performances. He's got a huge sort of target share and air yard share, so you want to be. He is definitely sort of that big play, big scoring ability player if they start clicking in Green Bay. But Jaden Reed will also be another asset to that. So those two players need to be looked at. And I definitely think Parker Washington is a player I would be looking at more and more. I know he's coming off a couple of disappointing performances, but in 3 of his last 4 games, he has reached 17 fantasy points. And in week 12, it was a better week for him with a 571 in 1 week. But he's out there a lot. He's playing over 80% of the snaps. So I would be looking at him and thinking, yes, okay, if Brian Thomas comes back, when's he coming back? They're saying it could be this week. And if that does happen, I think you're going to see Washington move to the slot, and I think he'll get a lot more work there. So Parker Washington for me, 40% owned, but I definitely someone I will be looking at adding in a lot of leagues. So I would be making sure he's there. Almost a forgotten man is Kayshon Boutte. People forget he had some absolutely monster weeks. And we saw him return this week, and he did have a huge sort of production week without doing much in terms of the box score. So you look at 15 yards, I think, what's he talking about? But in terms of he was second in snaps played, first in routes run, they're going to be really important because that's the kind of box scores. How healthy is he? And if he's out there doing those kind of things, Boutte will get involved. He has kind of got this sort of really high ceiling, low floor kind of playability. And I think that's going to be something that is going to be playing into thinking, but he's the kind of game wrecker that could ruin really good fantasy teams in the sense of you could have a really solid like 10-win fantasy team and come across a Kayshon Boutte who could put up a 25-point week and knock you out of the playoffs. So again, a player that you might want to think about stashing and don't let your opponents have. That could be a really good one to kind of just stash away. And then Andre Yoshevash, we kind of thought he would be a 1-week play, but with T. Higgins in the concussion protocol and only really entering that yesterday, it's very unlikely T. Higgins is going to play this week. So Yoshevash is going to get another week. And with Joe Burrow back, that could be a really, really big sign. And then let's not forget John Mechie. John Mechie had a pretty strong performance against the Ravens, 25% target share. Touchdown, 65 yards, touchdowns in back-to-back games. He has got Miami next, he's got Miami, in week 14, and Miami have allowed the 4th most fantasy points to target to slot receivers so far this season. So in terms of trying to get you over the line in week 14, John Mechie is a guy you want to look at. A.D. Mitchell as well in that same team has got a significant target share as well, over 20%, but he's got over 50% air yard share and a significant A-dot of 17.2. And that's all according to fantasy points data. So you've got that in what he can do. And with Atlanta and Jacksonville in 2 of his next 3 games, they're giving up both top 10 most amount of points allowed to perimeter wide receivers, which is again really, really significant. So we've got to have a look at what they're doing and their ability to do that. And A.D. Mitchell could be a really sneaky sort of fantasy play. Again, those guys are sort of 1% owned. Not going to cost you a lot. They're going to cost you $1, but they could be really significant adds when the season shakes out. And I keep talking about Luther Burden. We keep seeing that Luther Burden, the route share is going up. It's still only around 60%. The target share hovering at 15%. He got a rushing attempt, so think back to the the Deebo Samuel kind of role, getting a few rushing attempts. Yes, it's just one, but we're starting to see it starting to get a little bit more with Luther Burden. He could have a significant say in the fantasy playoffs, so just keep an eye on him as well. And a lot of talk about Isaiah Hodgins. Now, again, 0% owned, had a big week. A lot of that was the Jameis Winston show, and that's going to happen. I think with Jackson Dart, I think he will fade a bit more into the oblivion. And Chris Godwin will still be out there in a lot of leagues. I think he's owned in about half of leagues. He will have a big piece, as will Tez Johnson in the Buccaneers. It looks like Baker Mayfield should be good to go next week. So we should be okay there. So just keep an eye on him. And then Tyler Lockett's the last one, 2% owned. With a change now with Chip Kelly, you're going to see Tyler Lockett get a little bit more. 76% snap share. Did get to those 10 fantasy points. He's just that sort of little bit of a desperation in a deep PPR league. He could offer you some real value there. Let's go to the quarterbacks here, and it is starting to be interesting now with all these injuries that we've got here. Probably the top ad is Trevor Lawrence. He's available in just over half of leagues. You're looking at Trevor Lawrence, and he has been putting up that sort of 16 fantasy points consistently. Sort of 6 of his last 7 games, he's been following that trend. He's got a really sort of friendly schedule in the next few games. Where he's got Tennessee, Indianapolis, he's got the Jets, and then he's got Denver. So there is some opportunities there for him. The question is the ceiling. It's not there. He's only really thrown multiple TDs in just 3 games in that run, which isn't particularly great. So I think, the completion percentage is the yards per attempt isn't particularly great. But he is starting to I think when you get Brian Thomas back, it will be a little bit easier for him. He's definitely the best option out there available, because the other options like Jacoby Brissett, he's like 60% owned. Sam Darnold, he's 60% owned. So then you're looking at the next options are like Cam Ward. And Cam Ward's had a couple of decent weeks in a row, mainly because of the rushing. In the last 2 weeks, he's had 33 and 37 yards rushing. But I don't know where the ceiling is with him. Does have the schedule that does go in his favor. But, I mean, your other option there is like Tyrod Taylor, which isn't an option I'd want to be exploring too heavily here. There is CJ Stroud. He's been in the concussion protocol. There's no real sign that he comes out of that. CJ Stroud could be a strong sort of option with the schedule that he's got, but again, he is not giving you a high ceiling. We're talking about in his last 3 of his last 4 games, he's been getting about 18 points, which again is fine, but there isn't that sort of big ceiling play here. If you want to be the gambling type, the 2 players I've looked at have that high ceiling but low floor. And if you're one of those teams that are going to scrape into the playoffs, Kirk Cousins, we know he's done it before. Wasn't a particularly great performance against the Saints. I don't think it needed to be, especially with no Drake London. Just the 200 yards passing, or 199 if we're being accurate. But we know he can get the ball vertical and he can get it downfield. Could be a really interesting one. Tyler Shook has been pretty okay. And we've seen the passing volume there. If we look at on Sunday, 43 passes, 243 yards, but no touchdowns. So if this team can get better and actually put some points up, they could be really interesting. They could be your sort of other options here. And then looking at the tight end options, it is thin out there. Darren Waller's been dropped in the majority of leagues. He is a player that will return soon because the Dolphins have opened up the window for him to return. So he could return in week 13. He has got really good matches against the Steelers and the Bengals in week 15 and 16. So he could be a really useful proposition in the playoffs. Also, you've got Brenton Strange. Again, we're talking about the injuries there in Jacksonville. He came back. He had 93 yards against the Cardinals on Sunday, which is huge. So Brenton Strange is immediately a really interesting ad and a player you should be putting some fab on if you're looking for a high upside tight end play. And then Colston Loveland is finally starting to get some traction, and he is starting to put up reasonable fantasy points. So we're seeing that Komet is kind of coming to the end now, and that's good news. But Loveland is still available in 60% of leagues, so you can jump on him. And then Dalton Schultz finally is cooking. He's starting to see some production now, and he is going to give you at least a nice floor in his last 9 games, he's had 5+ receptions 7 times, which is a really nice part of getting that sort of path to 10 fantasy points, which is kind of what you need out your tight end if it's been a bit of a dumpster fire for you. And Mike Gesicki came out and he had a pretty decent week, especially sort of knocking Noah Fant into oblivion, really. 6 targets, 4 for 35. Not the best week, but again, shaking off that rust since he's been out for a while. We could see him get some more work against the Ravens on Thanksgiving. With all those extra games on Thanksgiving, it's going to be interesting to manage those teams and get them up and running nice and early as well. That's going to give you sort of most of the key skill positions. If you're looking at kickers, Evan McPherson is probably the best option out there. He's available in over 60% of leagues. And with Joe Barrow back, that offense will be better. There'll be more scoring opportunities. But you can also look at Andy Borregales. The issue with Borregales isn't the fact that he's not doing well, because he's doing really, really well. It's the fact that he's got a bye in week 14, so he becomes a really short-term option, because then you need to drop him and then you need to get someone else. But you could also have a look at Zane Gonzalez. He's pretty much free, available in 98% of leagues, and he's doing a pretty good job at the moment. And if you're looking for defensive plays this week, have first of all a look and see if the Patriots are out there, because they're still available in leagues, and although they are owned in 70% of leagues. If not, you want to be looking at the Falcons against the Jets, although they are 50% owned. They became like a good back-to-back streaming option for New Orleans last week, and then the Jets. The Chargers also would have been dropped in a lot of leagues because they were on bye last week. They've got Vegas this week, so they're a really good option to pick up. They're available in about 60% of leagues, but I reckon in a lot of your leagues they should be free, because people don't carry 2 defenses all that often. Or you can look at San Francisco. They're not really well owned. They're, I think, about 20% owned. They have Cleveland this week and Jacksonville. Again, they became a really good 2-part option. They've got Tennessee this week, so it could be another good option there for you. But that's going to cover the waiver wire for this week. In week 12, we will be back with a flagship show. Apologies for no flagship show last week. Unfortunately, there's just been a few bits and pieces going on in life that have just... I'm not going to go into too much detail, but, luckily I sort of received some really bad news last week, and then over the weekend that situation got a bit better. Unfortunately, it's sort of been a bit of a spate of bits and pieces going on, unfortunately. But nothing to do with me personally. I am fine. My health is good. I still say this to people, say, how's your health? And if you're new to the channel, I went through a big thing a couple of years ago with ulcerative colitis, why we raised a lot of money for ulcerative colitis. I'm fine. It's nothing to do with my health. It's just people that are very, very close to me, that are family and very close friends that I view as family, have had some pieces going on that have just been really, really difficult. And I've tried to be the best support I can be for that. Outside of that, while we're on about charity, the FFCC, down the final 8 in the main event and the plate, we crowned our winner in the Squid Game. Congratulations, Simo, for winning the Squid Game. If you want to enter next year's tournament, get entry into the Scottish Bowl, prizes, be a world champion, we're giving away jerseys to anyone that signs up by the 5th of December. I did originally say the 1st, but I've opened up a few extra days just to get a few more entries in. We're trying to get 50 people signed up between now and December 5th. If you do and you donate, you will be entered to win a signed jersey. If we hit that target, we will open up a second signed item. The signed jersey we're giving away is I've got it here. It's a Jeff Garcia signed jersey, which is just here. So we're giving that away. So, help us hit our target. And if we get there, I'll give away another signed item. So, will be exciting times for sure. But thank you so much for tuning in and trusting us with your fantasy teams as we help you try and bring some ships into the harbour. We will be back later this week with the flagship. Until then, Rush Nation, enjoy your week. Don't get too cold. Turn that heating up. Get ready for those fantasy playoffs. And more importantly, don't forget, keep rushing.